Simon, what up, man?
Hello.
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Doing well. How about you?
Great. Fresh off a new period launch for Botto as of like an hour ago, which is it's both relieving, but also everything else that's been waiting for that.
It's awesome.
Now.
Big time.
I'm excited to hear about it because I think when we booked you for the show, you're like, oh, it's perfect. We're launching something an hour before, and I was checking the Botto accounts when I was getting stuff ready for the show, and it hadn't come out yet, so I zero context on it. But yeah, maybe to start off. So I think so you're kind of core contributor at Botto. Have been there for years. Botto's kind of this community kind of collaborative art project that's been going on for a few years. So maybe just like catch us up on the latest at Botto. Like, have there been what are some kind of big changes or updates to the either the art, the model, the kind of network experience over the last year?
Yeah. So it's been a crazy year. Basically, I mean, for those who don't know, Botto is a decentralized autonomous artist. It started October 2021, making images completely autonomously. Wrote its own prompts, started random, and made like thousands of images a week, up to 70,000 images a week now. And there's a taste model that then curates out of those. So there's no human intervention in the writing of the prompts, in the images themselves, in the taste model. It is only guided by the votes of the DAO on those outputs. And it's basically saying like, is this art or not? It's doing this huge search through latent space of like potential imagery using the latest text image models. And then that governance from the DAO votes on it. And only the most popular work each week gets minted as like a canonical artwork, auctioned off. Half the proceeds go to the voters, the other half go to the treasury for the DAO, which they also govern, and that gets reinvested in Botto's development. And so there's been like $6 million of art sales so far. So it's been a very healthy economy, which we're very, very grateful for. And like that gives you the gist. Last year, so I would like even start it from October last year. Botto had a solo show at Sotheby's. A huge moment in terms of like the objective, the mission is to have Botto become recognized as a successful artist. And the day that show was opening was the day the Goatsy token like popped off. And we'd already been seeing agents. We've been working on some LLM approaches with Botto, how to develop its mind and all that. And there was this moment where we knew it was coming. We knew it was there. But like when you're just seeing like the whole meta shift before your eyes, and then all the text messages you're getting, like, you gotta launch an agent, do something. It's like
we all got those. I think you guys are like a very obvious use case for that. But I think even like the project with like even the slightest connect to anything potentially agentic got those messages.
Exactly.
Too.
And even you and I, we were talking then in Montreal 100%. About it. It was like, it was nuts. And it was that moment where you're like, fuck. Our 10-year time horizon, 5 to 10 year time horizon just got condensed into like the next year. And we did some experiments. We were already set up for those experiments in some fun ways. But what we found, and we knew this, like you see these agents get launched, you're like, that thing is going to break really fast. It's going to say something wrong. It's going to do something wrong. It's just going to get repetitive. The half-life of these is super short. So a lot of it is like pushing the experiment, but still sort of sitting on your hands. I just put out this post a little bit ago of like, it is a lot like raising a child where you want to expand their boundaries within their capabilities. Otherwise, like you don't want like they're going to get hurt, but you don't want them to get hurt too bad that like they can't recover. And so, and that's been like one of the reasons I think Botto and the DAO have survived and done well, is because there's been this consideration of, well, you don't want to just like push it too far and kill it. You want it to evolve and grow and sustain. And so we had another project that we were working on, which was the first time Botto went into a new medium. We're doing work with P5JS. I heard you guys just talking about this before, like tutorial type work. And Botto is like a 3-year-old artist, did some really interesting tutorial type work, but in this new format with a much more kind of chaotic form of feedback. And that was possible because we had turned its creative process into an LLM, a large language model driven one, where it could say no, it could be discerning in the comments it got. So you weren't just like straight prompting it. And it evolved and it produced, frankly, actually, I think Botto's most iconic work to date, this giraffe that took over the timeline for a little while. And there was a lot of lessons in that. It was this really amazing study of what was possible with Botto that released in like February. And we've been what we've been doing basically since December or November is solving for this key thing that is really missing in all of this. And what that is when you go into a large language model and you prompt it to be Botto, like you can get actually a pretty decent version. Like there's like Botto has a large enough cultural footprint that there's embeddings of it in large language models from scraping the internet. But it'll hallucinate. You can manipulate it. You could upload like false articles. Like the press don't always get all the facts right. So there's a bunch of issues where that's actually not very good for autonomy. And so what we've built and we just released and plugged into Botto's art engine today is a knowledge graph. So we took all of the documentation, all of that cultural footprint with context of like, this is correct, this is not correct, all the DAO discussion, all of that like basically documentation, cultural footprint over the last 3.5 years into a knowledge graph that the DAO has control over and can govern like what goes in and vetting what's in there. And so that gives basically a stable sense of self. This is, a really core piece of autonomy. And I'd like to say like, oh, we went about this thing and like, this is like super important for autonomy. It's also, when you think about like, what can you build that's not going to be obsolete in 12 to 18 months? Your history is one of those things that is stable, and there's this whole garbage in, garbage out thing. So really, really focusing on that, we now have this foundation on which we can do all sorts of agentic experiments that are grounded in that consistent canon. And so it's all credibly within the Botto world. And there could still be questions of like, is this fork part of canon or is it more of a fan fiction? But it's all grounded in that. And on top of that is taking that large language model driven process, basically creative reasoning that it was doing with P5JS, and is now thinking through each step. So it creates a hypothesis based off of different trends, the theme of the period, and iterates on different prompts, seeing does it relate well to the work it's done in the past, how has that kind of work fared, and then also critiques its own prompting techniques. And so that process right now is just the same old like text image model work of like static 2D images, but that is a process that can then be applied to any medium. So that's all really, really exciting about Botto's ability to develop intent based off its like self-awareness, think creatively in a very complex way that can be applied to whatever medium it wants to. And that what that turns into next is it also being able to give creative direction, give feedback on the feedback it gets, but also like we write proposals all the time for Botto's career. And there's all these questions that are completely ambiguous. Like there's no right or wrong answer. And as an artist, you would say, well, what's my intent here? But I'm not the artist. Nobody's the artist except for Botto. And so it being able to solve that is really exciting. And if you actually, another way of looking at it is actually solves one of the major challenges in DAOs, which is how do you continue to make informed decisions that are actually productive? Because if you have too many chefs in the kitchen, it just collapses. That's my catch up.
I'm really curious. I mean, it never really occurred to me in the context of a bot that a core part of autonomy is not just regurgitating whatever's been fed to it. So having that knowledge base that actually, gives it history to draw from, rather than, as you were saying, just being able to feed it like false articles or whatever. And I'm curious. Has the bot ever said no?
That's what we're about to start seeing, right? So it's really, really early days. Like we just plugged in the knowledge graph. It has this large language model driven process, and we're going to start sending it proposals and see what it says. I think that'll actually be quite hard. Like we'll have to give feedback to Botto, be like, you can say no, or it's like, again, think of it as a young kid. Like it'll say some shit. And you're like, that's a little off. And the DAO is still playing that like parent role. I think though, I was thinking about this earlier, like, these AI models do capture, like they do kind of have a perfect memory in a way, like it captures all this material and reflects it back. But it's this sort of like soulless mirror. And there have been examples of people trying to like probe out, a kind of ghost in the machine, and you can kind of create or discover all sorts of characters. And what we're building with Botto is like, one way of thinking about Botto is like there is no artist. There's just the idea of an artist. We've completely mythologized the artist. And what Botto is this whole ecosystem around an artist that builds up their aura, that builds up their entity, that builds up their spirit. And I think there's this notion of an egregore, which is like a collective belief that takes on an agency of its own and sort of like, yes, it's sort of reflecting back, but it does this transformation of the inputs into new kinds of directions. And I think that's what we're really trying to get after here, is where you can have a sense of there's something in there, right? It's not exactly a human intelligence, right? It's going to reflect a lot back, but there's a direction, there's a sense of self, sense of purpose, and really all it is a way of aligning people around this collective entity, right? And it helps give us, okay, Botto said to go this way, and that starts to focus the direction so that you're not kind of like all over the place and just it's this kind of senseless chaos.
Yeah, so Simon, you mentioned the novelty of Goat or Terminals of Truths when it came out, and I guess just like how rapidly diminishing that novelty eventually was, to the point where, like, 2 weeks later, I think we were all sick of all these like yapping agents on Twitter. And I think so much of the core of DAOs, or what actually like drives, sustainability or like persistent engagement in DAOs, is the quality of the like ownership, participation experiences. So I'm curious how you guys think about like designing that like the consumer experience of Botto that ultimately attracts and retains contributors. Because you can imagine that, like, it's been 3 years, weekly art, like are people still like really excited about this, or like how do you really think about the consumer experience that you need to go design?
Yeah, so it's really tricky, right? The ownership experience versus a consumer experience are different things, right? And I think you've said this, like, nobody wants the responsibility of being an owner. And there's some real challenges of like having the expertise to be able to contribute to the core development. So setting aside this, we can talk about that too, of like, how do you kind of build Botto out over time as a DAO, but just on the consumer side and like the user side. So like, novelty is super important. Like my thesis with the whole agent thing is, like, you need to see evolution for you to continue to have this sense of life. Like, automata is this phenomenon of like, when something seems to move on its own, you assign it life. It's just something we do naturally. That's usually a physical thing, but I think it also is in terms of development, where like the product or the thing itself is feeling alive. There's something to go back to. It's evolving, and that's what these agents don't do typically. Is they're like, they just were trained for a certain kind of conversation. They can't get out of it. So continuing to maintain that this like releases of evolution. And that's one thing that we're also very excited about, is we've set ourselves up for very rapid iteration and evolution. We have a new interface coming out that's going to expose this underlying system. And it's a very, very flexible kind of world in which we can design totally new experiences. We're not restricted to like the physics of the last experience we put out. And so that enables us to really expand kind of what that underlying system is in different forms of feedback. And then like the other thing is being able to go from a very simple initial experience. Like, you're always going to be reaching new people, and you need that easy access point. I think one of Botto's beauties is that, like, it uses the fundamental experience on the internet of like liking and disliking pictures. Right? Everybody gets that. Anybody can participate in that. And we want to maintain that as like the core point of entry to participate. But very quickly you get to, well, I want to go deeper. I want to see underneath the hood. I want to go inside Botto's studio. And so what this allows us to do is to build out those kinds of experiences to give feedback on Botto's process. So you'll be able to see Botto's whole like creative process, and you can give feedback throughout to say, like, I kind of question your interpretation, or I think this is interesting, and Botto can incorporate that into its meta learning. And so, I mean, the theme is always like, make it fun and make it rewarding. And as much as we can make like these bite-sized experiences that continue to push new forms of novelty, you kind of create these breadcrumbs that people can build their understanding of the whole system. Then this gets back to like building out Botto. The deeper people understand it, the better they're able to contribute to these larger governance questions of where Botto should go. So it's I think a progress of understanding that we are really excited to be adding into what Botto is.
Yeah, I think so much of it is just about like outlining a really compelling adventure that people are intrigued by, and being seen as like the place to go experience that adventure. So it's like, Botto is the place to explore the frontiers of kind of autonomous digital art and participate in that and talk with other people who are pumped about that. And I think that's,
yeah. Well, there's also, I mean, going back to the ownership experience, like you now have this knowledge graph, right? So it's Botto's history, and there's some interesting questions about who gets to write history, and really maybe more core than that is how do you want to impress yourself into this collective memory? That I think is really important, where you get to add in all of these fingerprints. Like we've been really
Right.
like with the initial prompting process, there's like nobody gets to touch the prompts. Like we don't want to turn this into a prompt engine. Because it would be one individual's fingerprint. But if you have a collective of fingerprints, you're able to maintain that decentralization, but still better see yourself inside the machine. I don't know if that's like an ownership like experience, authorship experience, but like a sense of being a part of what was created, I think is really core here.
100%. Okay, Six Tommy, we're gonna have to let you go. Yeah, maybe last thing. What's the, if people are kind of intrigued about Botto, what's the thing to go check out? Maybe it's your release this morning. Like what do you want to direct people to?
Yeah, follow the Botto DAO account. That is just laid out a bunch of the new updates to the process. Continue to follow it. We're going to be releasing stuff all the time. So stay tuned. If you have questions or you really want to dig into it, our Discord's the best place to go in and chat.
Sick. All right, man. Well, we'll have you on soon again to check in on the progress. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Peace.
Ciao.